OBS. Stop recording button.
Alright folks, it's Tamer here, and this is just going to be a breakdown of the Duels tournament, which I finally finished uploading the matches yesterday. All finals matches were uploaded, and everything was accessible via, you can watch the entire tournament, not necessarily in match order though, on the channel. And you can just watch them all on the playlist, which I titled Duels Tournament Highlights. Blaze of Glory Duels Tournament Highlights. Yeah. So I'm just gonna talk about, my thoughts on all the matches, and what the general meta of the tournament looked like. So, starting with the opening match, which is Demon Warrior versus Taha in bracket 1. And this is where we really start to see the meta shape. For the record, it was a great duel. It went all the way to round 3 with Demon Warrior coming out on top. He would take round 1, and Taha would take round 2. So we saw an interesting meta on Taha's end, using Greatsword and Broadaxe. Personally, not a combination I think would work well together, but he did some decent work with it. And this is, like I said, where we really start to see a lot of the meta shape out, because there was a lot of Broadaxe, and the overall meta in terms of armor was absolutely dominated by the map trade, which both players had in this duel, if I remember correctly. But I mean, it was a great duel, and then from there we had just Monaco versus Taha, which was pretty one-sided. He was one of the only Spatha users, just Monaco, aka Red Video. I'll just refer to him as Randy from here on out, because, I mean, you all know him from the channel. And he never revealed his secondary in any of his duels. Against Demon Warrior, which was the shortest duel of the match, he would just Broadaxe him down on a loadout built differently. That duel would last less than a minute. Easily the fastest duel of the tournament, probably in Blades of Glory history. But just on this bracket alone, every armor loadout had Vat Betrayal loaded. We saw a fair bit of Broadaxe, some Spatha. I believe Demon Warrior was using Viking Sword and Doru. And it's hard to say what the shields were, because they weren't really a factor. And that's, as you'll find, going to be a commonality throughout this tournament. And then, so we move into the second bracket, which was full of no-shows at the start, so it was covered by basically the beta team. It was myself, John Edward, and Muhammad. So the opening bracket of that duel, I messed up my wording. The opening duel of that bracket would be myself versus John Edward. By the way, I would nearly perfect him, I think. I think I had around 600 health in our second round. I would sweep him in 2. But yeah, he would use the pike, and I think the arming sword was his secondary. And I was using Rondel and Pilum with Segmentada. I believe John Edward was actually using plate armor. I could be wrong on that one. I'll have to go back and check the duel. But yeah, it was a pretty dominant performance in my favor. Like, I would just use the Pilum the entire way through. I think actually in round 1, I killed him on the Glory Strike of the Rondel. And like I said, this is where light armors overall dominated the tournament. I would use Segmentada the entire way through. and I would carry it to. Well, we'll talk about that later. But yes, um, and then in match two, it was my final match of the bracket against Muhammad, and here we see an interesting choice. He would use the Rondel, and he would also. I don't remember his secondary field. I would win, but both matches would be very close. I believe I won that one too as well. He would get me. He got me to about 300 in the first round, and then another 450 in the second. And with the round of 90. I did eventually end up winning though, both times. That was a really hard fought duel. But I would end up winning that one, and so that would put me in first place for the bracket, and so that I secured my spot in the finals. By the way, Randy would be the winner of bracket 1 going 2-0. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. And then for match 3, we had John Edward versus Muhammad in bracket 2. So, that one would be Muhammad winning in 3. It would be a very close duel, but here we see an interesting choice in Muhammad's loadout. He would use the flail. And the flail is, as he demonstrated, a highly underrated weapon. It has a great speed, and it does a ton of damage. Not to mention with the Glorious Strike that allows you to pull the target closer to you, which is kind of what you want to do with that, because it has a range of 3.5. So Muhammad ended up winning that duel. So for the placements of the bracket, we'd have John Edward in third with a record of 0-2. Muhammad in second with a 1-1 record, and myself in first with a 2-0. So that one we have our second person who would be in the final four. Secured. Now bracket 3 was our first where we had every player show up. It was Hugbunter, the Sharp Diamond, Fireboy, and Titanium Gold. And again, we see a bunch of Apnatrea, we see Broadaxe, and we see Rondel. Like, most common weapons, I believe there were some great swords here. Hugbunter is the Copus. But yeah, again, we see that demonstration of light armor dominance, and Broadaxe and Rondel on a bunch of loadouts. So the opening duel would be Fireboy versus Titanium Golem. And Fireboy would end up winning that duel. And then we see a couple matches done from Hugbunter, which he would win, and then a Sharp Diamond would also be Titanium Golem. Titanium would end up taking fourth. And Sharp Diamond beat Fireboy, which in the end put the players in a position where Hugbunter and Diamond were fighting for the finals slot. In a duel that would go all the way to round 3. Easily one of the most, if not the most intense duels of the tournament. I would definitely put it within the top 5. Most intense. And it was a very interesting thing to watch. Like I said, all these duels you can check out on the Duels Highlights playlist I uploaded. And so we see Hugbunter go 3-0 in the bracket, and Sharp Diamond go 2-1. Fireboy would go 1-2, and Titanium go 0-3, so that determined the standings, putting Hugbunter in the finals. Which he was fairly confident about that. We'll get more into that as we progress forward. So then, with all that, since all 3 second place people just so happen to be online, we decided to hold a wild card bracket. to determine the fourth player of the final four. And the way this would work is we take the second place people from each of the first three brackets and put them into one bracket. That made it Demon Warrior, Muhammad, and the Sharp Diamond. And I believe that opener would kick off with Demon Warrior versus Muhammad. Demon Warrior would end up winning in 2 rounds, I believe, using a combination of the Doru and the Viking Sword with Apollo's Blessing. And again, Vapnatreya dominant here. Diamond and Demon Warrior would both use it. I do not remember what armor Muhammad used, but again, we also do see the flail do some work. And the rondel, I believe, was also used to a fairly good extent. Speaking of which, match 2 was Sharp Diamond versus Muhammad. And the rondel really shows the work it does here on Diamond's end, as his first attack is the charge attack, which he lands. And Diamond would end up winning this. And that would create a Demon Warrior versus Sharp Diamond match to determine who would make the final four. Winner take all. Round 1. We see the victory go to Demon Warrior. The one commonality we see as this duel would go to round 3 is Diamond would land rondel charge, Demon Warrior would Apollo. Round 2 was fairly close, though Diamond would win. Then round 3, folks, is something to watch. Again, like I said, opening position, Diamond would charge, Demon would Apollo. But eventually, after going back and forth for some time, we end up in this position where both players are a one-shot. But Diamond would manage to land a broadaxe, hit, and win the game. And so just like that, our final 4 were just Monica, aka Randy, Hugbunter, myself, and the Sharp Diamond. We also did an interview with the Sharp Diamond, which I did not put on the playlist, but you can view on the channel. Basically just asking the Sharp Diamond what his idea was. And so, for the finals, so to explain the rules of the tournament, we had to submit 2 loadouts that we were bound to using for the brackets. The finals, these loadout constraints were removed. Therefore, we could go into the duel with any loadout. And so, the opening of the finals is just Monica versus Hugbunter, and we see Spatha and Broadaxe. Wait, no, I could be wrong about that. I'm not. Actually, no, I don't ever think we saw a secondary, so it was just Spatha and Broadaxe and Copus. And so, well, it starts with an audio bug on Hugbunter, who then ends up switching a weapon. He gets warned about disqualification, and so he switches back after the match is restarted for a second time. Ah, yes, actually, I forgot to mention, in my duel against John Edward, we had a situation where we had to restart the match because Edward had an audio bug. But that duel would be taken by just Monica in a double elimination style bracket. And then, oh god. So with him having secured his spot as a win, to see who would face the winner of the next match, which is yourself against the Sharp Diamond. I would be using Segmentata with the Spatha and Broadaxe. Diamond would be using the Rondel with the Broadaxe and Vapnatreya. Our first round was very close, but in the end, I would be down at 250 and lose to timer. Our second round was just as close, I believe I'd end up winning that one, though I would land the final hit to win that round. I would. Uh, I ended up winning that one, I believe, on 300 health. But then our third round would prove to be wire to wire. In the end, we ended up in the situation where I was at 300, he was a bit lower, and I would end up just barely winning the duel by timer. So we see one of the longest duels in the tournament determined by a round 1 and a round 3 timer. So now for the next match, it is, like I said, double elimination, so you have to lose twice. So we see the two players who have a record of 0-1, the Sharp Diamond and Hug Bunter, go head to head to stay in the tournament. The winner will have a chance to continue the tournament run, but still hangs on the one loss means you're out. And it goes all the way to round 3. Sharp Diamond takes round 1. Hug Bunter takes round 2. Sharp Diamond takes round 3. Diamond's using Rondel and Broadaxe and Treya. And I don't remember his ability. Actually, it was Outrage. Hug Bunter would use Charge on his ability and would use the Copus and the Broadaxe. It was a very close duel, though. And that would make the Sharp Diamond face the winner, or rather the loser between myself and Randy. Hug Bunter would be eliminated at this point, and by the way, funny thing to note here is that Diamond actually ends up losing to Hug Bunter, as I mentioned earlier, in bracket 3 for the slot in the finals. So we see like this something of a combat arc, a comeback arc on Diamond's end. So Randy and I are round 1. We decided to pull a little joke on our commentators and everybody watching. Basically, we planned and practiced it, folks. So what we did was we started attacking each other, decided to make it look aggressive. Then I sent him a PM, and we started running away. The goal was simple. Someone was gonna die to arrows. So I ended up winning because he was on lower HP anyway. I believe I won that one by timer because he tried to finish each other off, but it didn't work. And then he'd end up beating me in the next 2 rounds. But yeah, we did that for the little thing. So now that puts me in a position where I have to face the Sharp Diamond again. Believe me, folks, I was not excited about that. If there was one player in that tournament who absolutely horrified me, it was the Sharp Diamond. There was another player that would have done it had they been able to show up, that being Dark. He was a no-show in bracket, unfortunately. But yeah, so I'd face the Sharp Diamond, and here, I do something that I thought I would come to regret. So, in our first duel of the second match of the finals, I use the Spatha, the Broadaxe, Lorica Segmentata, Boss Round Shield, and Odin's Justice. I don't change my ability, I don't change the armor, my primary weapon, or my shield. What I do change is the secondary weapon. I change from the Broadaxe to the Pillow. I considered it heavily, though. Heavily. And in the end came to one conclusion. that you can hear on the stream I did over the finals. It was not captured in the recording that I uploaded, but it was captured on stream. Right before I click Save Loadout, I say, I think I've made a mistake. It was something I thoroughly believed. I believe that Diamond would be able to counter the pillow, but as it turns out, round 1 opens, and I get 3 hits in before I'm even hit once. Maybe it was 2, but I'm pretty sure it was 3, if I remember correctly. And I actually don't end up taking too much damage in round 1, and I actually win it pretty... not quickly, but pretty... I think fairly easily. Round 2 was a bit closer, but in the end I would end up sweeping Diamond. So his little comeback arc is kind of cut short by me. Which, it would have been something if he had beaten me, folks. Definitely would have been. But yes, that was also one hell of a duel. That would conclude the second to last match of the tournament. At this point, our third place person has been determined. Our fourth place person has been determined. Our finals matchup has been determined. Only 2 things left to determine. Who takes second? Who becomes champion of the first Blaze of Glory tournament? Neither player will hold back. They have dueled each other far too many times in the past. And although the outcome is normally the same, it would, should that have been the case, not be clean. And clean it was not. I would face Randy in circumstances that were fairly stressful, albeit fairly familiar. He created his account on August 8th, 2025. I created mine on August 9th, 2025. We have dueled each other hundreds of times. In fact, he makes up a majority of my losses on me. I would run Gladius, Segmentata, Doru, Boss Round Shield, Apollo's Blessing. He would run Spatha, Doru, Boss Round Shield, Vatmatreya, Apollo's Blessing. In round 1, I believe I would lose that by timer. In round 2, we were in something of a damage race, though he would end up eventually beating me, and winning the tournament as a result. Getting through the finals with a record of 3-0, I would come out of it with a record of 2-2. Diamond would go on to have a record of 1-2, and Hugbunter would be 0-2. That would conclude the tournament. Fourth place person, I believe, according to my notes, would receive 150 ingots. Third would receive 175, second 200, and first 250. Also a custom title for the first place person. Randy selected the title of the Unmatched. Mind you, he is very much matched though. Overall, the tournament was fairly successful. Thank you to the beta team members who took on Bracket 2. And thank you to everyone who participated. Yes. It was a great tournament. I organized it with help from Blind Goofball and Beta Bros, who hosted it graciously from Nibble Nerds. And like I said, it was a very light armored dominated meta of the tournament. There was a lot of Broadaxe, a lot of Rondel. But it also really showed the creativity of some of those loadouts. And overall, I think it was definitely something that could be done again in the future, just hopefully it goes a bit more smoothly. And if anyone enjoyed the tournament, please let me know in the comments if you were able to watch it. Like I said, if not, you can check out each individual duel on the Duels Tournament Highlights playlist. I will not make this part of that. But, with that being said, this is Madam Tamer signing off.
Stop recording button.
And I hope that I'll see you in the arena.